Good day, grade 12. Today we are looking at another essay question. We have now finished with the short-run equilibrium positions of the individual producer in the perfect market. So if you go to page 24 in your textbook, we are now going to look at what is going to happen in the long run. Okay, now if you think back to the previous lessons, in the short run, there is 3 different equilibrium positions. Your individual producer can make an economic profit, a normal profit, or an economic loss in the short run. In the long run, it is only ever going to make a normal profit. Now, in the perfect market, remember we said there is freedom of entry and exit. So anybody wanting to enter the industry can do so. There's nothing preventing them from entering the industry. Anybody wanting to leave the industry is also free to do so. There's nothing preventing anybody from leaving the industry. So in the long run, the perfect market will be influenced by the entry and exit of individual businesses. What is going to happen is, if your individual business is making an economic profit, right? So any individual business in this industry is making an economic profit. Other entrepreneurs will want to enter this industry because they also want to come and share in these economic profits. When business currently in the industry are making economic losses, some of these will leave. There's freedom of exit. They want to maximize profits. They're not going to stay in this industry indefinitely if they are making losses. Then they would rather close down their business and disinvest and take their money, and they will invest it in another industry that is potentially more profitable. If a business is making a normal profit, so in other words, their costs and revenue is equal and they are breaking even, then there is no reason for any business to enter this industry, but also no reason for existing businesses to want to leave this industry. All right. So what is the signal for people to want to enter this industry is economic profits. All right. So when in the short run an economic profit is being made, because of freedom of entry, more entrepreneurs would want to enter this industry to share in this profit, which means that your market supply is going to increase. If businesses in this industry currently is making economic losses and some of them decide to leave, that would mean that the market supply will decrease, okay, because they want to make an investment elsewhere. All right. Now, this is a possible essay question. You can look on your exam guideline. It's underneath the heading. Let's discuss in detail also the long-term equilibrium position. But what is very important that if you do the long-term equilibrium, you must always remember what happens in the long run depends on what happened in the short run. So we cannot start our analysis with the long run. We always are going to start with what happens in the short run, and then we're going to push over into the long run. Now there's 2 possibilities here. In the short run, either your individual business is going to make an economic profit, or your individual business is going to make an economic loss. Okay, now it depends on how the question is going to be asked. If the question is very specific and they ask you, what is going to happen in the long run, or how is the long run equilibrium going to be affected if your individual producer makes an economic profit in the short run? Then you have to start with the profit and you have to tell that story. If the question asks how the long run equilibrium will be affected if the individual business is making an economic loss in the short run, then you have to start with an economic loss and show how that is going to change in the long run. But mostly, they're going to ask this question as an open question. They are merely going to say, for example, to analyze the long run equilibrium for the industry and for the individual business. Okay, so they're going to ask you just a general question as to discuss the long run equilibrium of the individual business in the perfect market, for example. Okay. Then you can choose if you want to start with an economic profit or if you want to start with an economic loss, then it's your choice. Today, I'm going to start with an economic profit, and I'm going to show you how an economic profit in the short run is going to turn into the long run normal profit. In the next lesson, we will look at the economic loss. Okay. Now, obviously, in this case, obviously, it is based on graphs. In the main part, you will also draw your graphs. You have a completed graph in your textbook, but as normal, when it comes to graphs, you are going to draw these graphs with me now. So when I draw the graphs now, in your workbook, you're going to write today's date, and you are also going to draw the graphs with me. Don't wait for me to be finished. That doesn't help. That's like defies the point. As I draw the graph, you are also drawing the graph. And when I draw the graph, I'm going to be explaining what I am doing, okay? And when I explain what I'm doing, that will be what I'm going to say basically in my discussion. That is going to be what you're going to be writing in your essay question. In your textbook, you will see there's your graph, and then there's a discussion underneath the graph. Okay, what happens in the short run, what happens in the long run. When I draw the graph, I'm going to be saying that. So afterwards, I'm not going to go through this content again. I'm going to explain what you're going to write down while I am drawing the graph. So as I'm drawing the graph, I'm going to be saying basically what you're going to be writing down. Now, what is very, very important though, is in an essay question like this, in any question, when you draw a graph, when you do your discussion must refer to your graph. So you can't go and study this content here in the textbook. You can't go and study this off by heart. You need to understand what you are supposed to be doing in your essay question. And then you're going to discuss, you're going to explain basically what is happening on your graph. So you can't, for example, in your discussion say that profits are maximized where marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. This is at point E. And then on your graph, there's no point E. Then you will get the marks for the graph, and they are not going to mark your discussion. They always mark the graph first. So you must make sure that whatever you refer to in your discussion actually physically appears on your graph as well. Right, in other words, your discussion must match your graph. Otherwise, you're going to get the marks for the graph and no marks for your discussion, and that's throwing away marks. Okay, now when we start drawing, it is very important also, I've said it again, I'm going to repeat it. You cannot, if they ask you the long run, you cannot shoot straight forwards to the long run because it depends on what happens in the short run. The situation in the short run is going to determine what is going to happen in the long run. Okay, so we always start with the short run because the short run will determine what is going to happen in the long run. Okay, so if we shoot now, we're going to draw the graph. I want you to turn your book sideways so that you have more space to draw your graph. Okay, we are going to make two graphs. One is going to be for the industry and one is for the individual producer. Right, because remember what happens in the industry will determine what happens for your individual producer. Right, so the first graph that we are going to draw is for the industry, the market, all the producers and all the consumers of this product put together. All right, that is going to give us the industry. All right, your vertical axis is your cost and revenue. I'm just making it price for now, just to be short. And your horizontal axis is your output or your quantity. On the second axis, and remember you are drawing this with me. Don't sit and look at me now. You are drawing this in your book because at the end of this lesson, you are going to send me pictures of your graphs so that I can see. That's my evidence that you have actually done this lesson and that you have listened and that you understand what you are doing. All right, if you don't have this drawn in your book, I am not going to answer your questions either. If you don't do what you are supposed to do, you don't deserve more of my time. All right, so price there. Ish. Okay, producer. Okay, cost and revenue on the vertical axis. and your output on the horizontal axis. Okay, now we are going to draw the short run first. So in your discussion, you're going to have a heading that says short run, and then you're going to explain subheading what happens in the industry and another subheading for explaining what happens to the individual producer. Okay, so we're going to start with the industry because obviously the industry is where it starts. It has to determine a price. Without getting a price from the industry, the individual producer doesn't know what to do. Okay, so in the short run, that's your main heading, and then your first subheading is the industry. All right, when we draw the graph, remember your market demand curve has a negative slope and your market supply curve has a positive slope. All right, where demand and supply is equal, you're going to make your little bolletjie there. Yeah, that is your equilibrium. And you're going to find what is the price. Okay, the market says the price is 10 Rand. Okay, so in your essay, you're physically going to be writing, for the industry, the price is determined by the interaction between the market demand and the market supply. Your equilibrium is at point E, because there is a point E on your graph. So the market price is determined to be 10 Rand. And that is it for your discussion for the industry in the short run. Remember, the only function of the industry, of the market, is to determine the price. Okay, once it has determined the price, its job is done. And then we're going to push to the individual producer. Okay, now for the individual producer, the market said that the price is 10 Rand. Okay, remember your individual producer is a price taker. So in your discussion, you're going to say that the market price is 10 Rand. The individual producer is a price taker. So it takes this 10 Rand and his demand curve is perfectly elastic, a horizontal line at the level of the market price, because of being a price taker. And because the price is constant, his demand curve is also his average revenue curve, and it is his marginal revenue curve. All right, that is step one. Okay, now from here, you're going to follow your steps. We are now looking at what is going to happen in the short run. This guy's making an economic profit. How is that going to change in the long run? So what we need to do now is we need to draw the individual producer making an economic profit. And to do that, we're going to follow our steps, the steps that we've been working with this whole time. Step one was to draw demand and average revenue and marginal revenue. We have done that. Okay, it's the one horizontal graph, perfectly elastic demand curve, because he is a price taker. Then in step two, we said we have to add marginal cost. It looks like the Nike swooshy, so we just do it. Okay, we add our marginal cost. We label the graphs as we go along. In step three said we need to find profit maximization point. So profits are maximized where marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. So we're going to make a bolletjie. Okay, now that one we've already used E. So in this case now we're going to use E1. Okay, profits are maximized. You're going to write this in your essay. Profits are maximized where marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. And on the graph, this is at point E1. That is 2 marks. Okay. Then part of step 3, once we have found our profit maximization point, we also have to find the price and the quantity. Okay, because this is the perfect market and he's a price taker, the price is already there. All we need to do now is to find our quantity. All right, so we go down, 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 and let's say the quantity is 100. All right, that is step 3. Find profit maximization and find the price and the quantity. In your essay, you're going to say, at profit maximization, the market price is 10 Rand and the profit maximizing output is 100. You get marks for that. Okay. Step 4 is we need to add our average cost. Okay, now you'll remember it is about the placement. The placement of the average cost will determine whether this individual producer is now going to make an economic profit, a normal profit, or an economic loss. We said we want him to make an economic profit. So when we add the average cost, remember, if it has to be a profit, average cost has to be below my average revenue. So there's my average revenue graph. When I add the average cost graph, it has to go at profit maximization. It has to be below my average revenue graph. But remember the shape. Average cost looks like a smiley. And remember, your average cost must intersect with marginal cost. We can't draw it here randomly. Or here, make a smiley anyway. It has to intersect with marginal cost. And marginal cost has to intersect average cost at where average cost is at its lowest. So when we draw it, remember we're going to go down, down, down until we touch marginal cost. When we're touching marginal cost, we are going to turn up. All right, and that is going to be our average cost. Okay, the minute that you've drawn the graph, you label it so that you don't forget. All right, that is step 4. We have now added average cost. Okay. Now what we need to do is, in the next step, we need to find what is the value of average cost because we need to shade the area. So we need to find the area of the profit. Okay, so once again, we go from your profit maximization. The dotted keys is already there. Dotted key, dotted key, dotted key, dotted key, dotted key, until you touch your average cost. Okay, there where you touch your average cost. You now go to the side and you give it a value. Okay, at profit maximization, my average cost is 8 Rand. All right. In your discussion, you are now going to say, at profit maximization, my average revenue is 10 Rand. My average cost is 8 Rand. Average cost is less than average revenue. Therefore, this person is making an economic profit. That's 2 marks. Okay. Now all that remains is we need to shade the area. All right, we need to make a shaded area to indicate the profit. And remember what I said? When we shade our area, it has to be a regular shape. Okay, it can't be a funny shape. It has to be a square or a rectangle, depending on how you've drawn your graph. But the parameters of your shading is there. There's your demand curve. Then the dotted lines going down to average cost. And the dotted lines going back to the axis. Okay, you don't let the graphs stop you. You have to go up to, that's where you're aiming for, the dotted lines. You're not going to shade and let this average cost stop you. You're not going to let the marginal cost stop you. We are shading all over. This whole area has to be shaded. Okay, remember I also said when you shade, preferably you can use a highlighter because you cannot obliterate the graphs underneath. Okay, your examiner still needs to see that the shapes of your graphs are correct so that they can give you the marks. All right, so don't kill the graph underneath. Shade your area nicely. Okay, remember into that little corner there as well. Everything, it must make a regular shape. There is your rectangle. Okay, very pretty. All right, then in your discussion, you're going to physically say that the economic profit is indicated by the shaded area. But you can't refer to a shaded area if you don't have a shaded area. So make sure you shade it so that you can say economic profit is indicated by the shaded area because that is 2 marks. Okay, and that's it for the short run. Okay, in the short run, we have now explained the industry is determining the price. Okay, price is determined by the interaction between the market demand and the market supply, 2 marks. Equilibrium is at point E. The market price is 10 Rand, 2 marks. Your individual producer is a price taker. So his demand curve is perfectly elastic or horizontal line. And D equals AR equals MR, 2 marks. MC represents the marginal cost of the individual producer. Profits are maximized where marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. This is at point E, 2 marks. The market price is 10 Rand. The profit maximizing output is 100, 2 marks. Your average cost curve falls below the average revenue curve. So the person is making an economic profit. Or you can say Average revenue is 10 Rand. Average cost is 8 Rand. Therefore, average cost is lower than average revenue. Individual producer is making an economic profit. 2 marks. The shaded area indicates the economic profit. 2 marks. That's it for the short run. Now we have to go to the long run. Okay, so your next main heading is the long run. And then again, you're going to have 2 subheadings to explain what happens in the industry and what happens with my individual producer. Okay, so now we're going to say for the industry first, when individual producers are making an economic profit, other entrepreneurs would like to enter this industry. This is possible because there's freedom of entry and exit. 2 marks. All right, so you must explain that it is possible. Others want to enter this industry because they also want to come and make economic profit. It is possible because there's freedom of entry and exit. That is 2 marks. Okay, that is going to mean now that in the industry, okay, if more businesses enter this industry, my market supply is going to increase. All right, in your discussion, you're saying market supply will increase. This means that SS is going to shift to the right to become S1. All right, and that is 2 marks. On the graph, you're going to get marks. And in your discussion, if you say that the market supply will increase, so supply moves to the right, S shifts to S1. 2 marks. Now, there has to be a new equilibrium. Right, so where the original demand curve and the new supply curve S1, where they intersect, this will be a new equilibrium. But now you must be careful because there's E, there's an E1. Now we have to have an E2. All right, so at point E2 is the new equilibrium for the industry. And then we're going to make this price 7. Okay, so the new market price is 7. And that's it for your discussion for the industry. We are now done with the industry. All right. Now, when we go to the individual producer, we know that he must now make a normal profit. Now, you know your theory, and the theory says that in the long run, my individual producer can make a normal profit only. Now, when we make a normal profit, that means that my average cost curve has to be tangent on my demand curve. Remember, the price can no longer be 10. The price is now dropped to 7. The market says the price is 7. Remember, your individual producer is still a price taker. He can't now still ask 10 Rand. He has to bring his price down as well. But when you draw it, you're going to draw it in such a way that your demand curve now is lying there. Okay, when you draw it, your average cost curve must now lie on top of your demand curve. Now you must draw it in such a way that it does. Okay, so now this is your new demand curve. Okay, so in your discussion, you're going to say each individual producer is still a price taker. So if the market price has now dropped to 7 Rand, your individual producer's demand curve will shift down to 7 Rand. Okay, it's still a perfectly elastic horizontal line, but now it will be at 7 Rand. Okay, he has to accept the 7 Rand as his price. So the new demand curve for the individual producer is represented by D1 equals AR1 equals MR1. When you draw it, make sure, if you're not sure, you do it in pencil first in an exam, but you have to draw it so that the average cost curve ultimately is lying on top of it. Okay, now our marginal cost is already there. Remember when we draw a graph, step 1 is we draw demand, average revenue and marginal revenue. We have done that now. But step 2 is we have to add the marginal cost. Marginal cost is already there. All right, all we need to do now is find profit maximization. So profits are maximized where marginal cost now intersects my new marginal revenue. That is going to be there. Okay, and that is going to be point E3 now. All right, E3 now, because there's E2, now we're on E3. Once we have profit maximization, we need to find the price. We have that already. and we need to find the quantity. All right, so my new quantity might be 90. All right, it's less. Now you can see that the quantity has decreased now. Okay. So at E3, in your discussion now, you can see the average cost is lying tangent on average revenue. So what this means is at my new profit maximization point at E3, my average cost is tangent on average revenue. So it's making a normal profit. Or you can say at E3, my average revenue is 7 Rand. My average cost, there is my average cost, is 7 Rand because they're all touching there at E3. Therefore, because my average revenue equals my average cost, this individual firm is making a normal profit only. Okay, and that is it. Okay, obviously, drawing this graph seems daunting. Okay, I know it's like brand new information. You have drawn this graph with me now. I want you to go through the content. Remember, through repetition comes understanding. Okay, remember, what was the steps that we took? We started in the short run with the industry and we drew the original demand and supply curve to find the price. Based on the price of the industry, we then proceeded to draw the individual producer. We followed our steps to draw the graph and we drew the individual producer making an economic profit. Okay, that was it for the short run. Then in the long run, because people are making economic profits and there's freedom of entry, more entrepreneurs entered the industry. If more businesses enter the industry, your supply will increase. Okay, so the market supply increased, and as a result of that, the price decreased. Because our individual producer is a price taker, he must also then decrease his price. So whatever the price is for the industry is the price that we're going to use for our individual producer. You get marks. Now, if that one is 10 and that one is 10, you physically get a mark because it's corresponding. Okay. So if this one and this one is the same, you're going to get a mark because it's the same price. But the trick comes in to when you draw this graph, you must draw it at the level where your average cost can then lie tangent. Because the only thing that is changing is the demand curve. The marginal cost you're using still the same for the long run. The average cost that is there, you are using that for the long run. We're not changing those. It is only the revenue that will change in the long run. So if you draw your demand curve so that the average cost lies tangent, automatically you're going to have a normal profit. Okay, I want you to go through the content. I'm going to go back quickly to the lesson itself. Okay, as I said earlier, when I drew the graph, this is basically what I was explaining. Okay, you're going to explain everything that you're doing in your graph, you are explaining. Negative demand curve, market demand curve, positively sloping market supply curve, market equilibrium where demand and supply is equal, what is your price, what is your quantity. Then you're going to go to your individual producer, you explain he's a price taker. You tell me what does his demand curve look like. Now it's perfectly elastic. Why is it perfectly elastic? D equals MR equals AR. Okay. Then you're going to add your marginal cost to explain profit maximization. It's at point E. What is the price? What is the quantity? Then we add the average cost. Okay. And then you explain average cost is below average revenue. Therefore, there's an economic profit. Profit is indicated by the shaded area. Okay, all this is based on the graph. Obviously, this is now based on the graph that is here in your textbook, that is there, right? Not on the one that I drew necessarily. Right, then in the long run, now you're going to say in the market, in the perfect market, there's freedom of entry. People are making economic profits. Others want to enter. There's nothing preventing them from entering. So as more competitors entering the market, market supply will increase. S increases to S1. There's a new equilibrium. What is your new price? What is your new quantity? Okay. And then lastly, again to your individual producer. Okay, because the market price has dropped, your individual producer needs to drop his price also because he's still a price taker. So the demand curve shifts down to the new market price of 7 Rand. So there's your new demand curve. At this point, your average revenue, your price is 7 Rand. Okay, profit maximization is where marginal revenue is marginal cost. You need to find your new profit maximization point. You find your new price, you find your new quantity, and then obviously you have to discuss now at your profit maximization point, average cost and average revenue is equal, and that means that a normal profit is made. Right, easy peasy. All right, I know I've said a lot today, okay? I want you to ask questions if you are not sure of anything, but graphs needs to be practiced. Drawing a graph once is not going to mean that next time you can do it perfectly. You must practice. All right, you have the advantage of this lesson being on a video now, so you can listen to this lesson over and over and over as many times as what it takes for you to be able to draw the graph eventually by yourself. Okay, practice makes perfect. This is practical stuff. You cannot expect that you will just magically understand. The more you do it, the better you're going to understand. As I always say, understanding comes from repetition. All right, so ask questions if you are not sure, and then you practice over and over until you get it right.